My friends, we live in a time when kindness is often mistaken for weakness, when being good-hearted is seen as an open door for manipulation. But I ask you today, is this what God desires for His people? Does He call us to be doormats, to let the world walk over us? No. Jesus Himself was compassionate, but He was not afraid to stand firm in truth. He loved, but He also rebuked. He forgave, but He also confronted. Some of you are exhausted, drained by always trying to please, always trying to keep the peace, always saying yes when your spirit is crying out no. But I want to tell you today, God did not create you to be used and abused. He called you to walk in wisdom, to discern who is worthy of your kindness and who is simply taking advantage of it. The Bible tells us to be as wise as serpents and innocent as doves. Matthew 10:16. That means there is a time to be kind, but there is also a time to be firm. So today I challenge you, stop letting guilt, fear, or pressure control your kindness. Let it be guided by God, not by the expectations of others. Because when you learn to say no to the wrong people, you create space to say yes to God's purpose for your life. Kindness is one of the most beautiful qualities a person can have. It reflects the love of Christ, shows compassion to the hurting, and brings light into a dark world. But there is a dangerous misunderstanding about kindness that has crept into the hearts of many believers. Too often, people assume that being kind means saying yes to everything, tolerating mistreatment, and allowing themselves to be used and taken for granted. This is not the kind of kindness that God calls us to. True kindness is not weakness, and if we misunderstand it, we can end up drained, frustrated, and far from the life God intends for us. Jesus was the perfect example of kindness, yet He was never weak. He was full of grace and truth, compassionate yet firm. When He encountered the woman caught in adultery, He showed mercy, saving her from being stoned, but He also told her, "Go and sin no more." His kindness did not ignore truth. It did not encourage sin. He loved people deeply, but He did not allow them to take advantage of Him or distract Him from His mission. There were times when Jesus walked away from crowds, times when He rebuked the Pharisees, and times when He confronted His own disciples. This was not because He lacked love, but because real kindness is rooted in wisdom. Many people mistake kindness for passivity. They believe that in order to be loving, they must avoid conflict at all costs, keep quiet when treated unfairly, and allow themselves to be pushed aside. But Jesus never taught this. In fact, He warned His disciples that they would face opposition and that they needed to stand firm. He said, "Do not give dogs what is sacred. Do not throw your pearls to pigs. If you do, they may trample them under their feet and turn and tear you to pieces." Matthew 7:6. That is a clear message that not everyone values what you offer. Not everyone deserves access to your time, energy, and heart. If you live with a heart that is always open, always giving, and never setting boundaries, you will eventually find yourself exhausted. There are people who will take your kindness and exploit it for their own benefit. They will come to you when they need something, but they will disappear when you are in need. They will drain you of your joy, your energy, and your resources, leaving you feeling empty and used. And the truth is, God never called you to live that way. He calls you to love, but He also calls you to be wise. Think about the story of the 10 virgins in Matthew 25. 5 of them were wise and 5 were foolish. When the bridegroom was delayed, the foolish virgins ran out of oil and asked the wise ones to share. But the wise virgins refused, saying, "No, there may not be enough for both us and you." Some might look at that response and think it was unkind. Shouldn't they have shared? But in reality, they were not being selfish. They were being wise. They understood that if they gave away what they had, they would not be ready when the bridegroom arrived. This is a powerful lesson. Sometimes saying no is the most loving thing you can do, not just for yourself, but for the purpose God has given you. Jesus never let the demands of others dictate His actions. He healed the sick, fed the hungry, and preached to thousands, but He also withdrew to be alone with the Father. He did not feel pressure to meet every need because He knew His mission and His limits. He understood that His time and energy were precious, and He did not allow people to pull Him away from His purpose. How many of us struggle with that? How many times have we stretched ourselves too thin, running from one obligation to the next, afraid to disappoint people? And yet, Jesus Himself showed us that it is not only okay to say no, it is necessary. The enemy loves to distort good things, and kindness is no exception. He wants you to believe that if you ever stand up for yourself, set boundaries, or walk away from toxic situations, you are being unloving. He wants you to feel guilty for protecting your heart, for guarding your time, and for refusing to be mistreated. But that is a lie. The kindness of Christ is powerful, but it is not weakness. It is rooted in truth, strength, and wisdom. It is kind to help someone in need, but it is not kind to enable someone's destructive behavior. It is kind to be generous, but it is not kind to let others manipulate and drain you. Many people struggle with this because they fear rejection. They are afraid that if they stop bending over backward for people, they will lose relationships. And in some cases, they might. But that is not always a bad thing. When you begin to walk in wisdom, when you start valuing the time and purpose God has given you, some people will walk away. Some will be angry that they can no longer use you. Some will accuse you of being selfish or unkind. But you must remember this: the people who truly love and respect you will not leave because you set boundaries. They will understand. The ones who only valued you for what they could take from you were never meant to stay. Kindness is a beautiful thing, but it must be guided by wisdom. It is not about saying yes to every demand. It is about loving as Christ loved, genuinely, intentionally, and wisely. Not everyone deserves your time and kindness. That is a hard truth, but it is one that must be understood if you want to live with wisdom. Too often people give their kindness to everyone, thinking it is the right thing to do, but they end up exhausted, drained, and taken for granted. The Bible teaches us to be loving, but it also teaches us to be discerning. If you do not learn to guard your kindness, you will find yourself giving it to people who do not appreciate it, who misuse it, and who take advantage of your good heart. Jesus himself showed us what it means to be discerning in relationships. He loved all people, but he did not trust all people. In John 2:24, the Bible says that Jesus did not entrust himself to certain people because he knew what was in their hearts. That means he understood that not everyone had good intentions. He knew that some people followed him only for what they could receive, whether it was a miracle, food, or status. Others followed him with jealousy in their hearts, waiting for a moment to trap him in his words. But Jesus was not fooled. He loved them, but he did not give them access to his heart. That is a lesson we must learn. Many people struggle because they think they are supposed to be open and kind to everyone. They believe they should always say yes, always be available, and always extend their time and energy to those who ask. But that is not what the Bible teaches. Proverbs 4:23 says, "Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it." If you do not guard your heart, if you do not protect your time and energy, you will become weary. You will begin to resent the very people you are trying to help because they will continue to take and take without giving anything in return. There are different kinds of people in life, and not all of them deserve the same level of access to you. Some people are genuine, loving, and supportive. They are the ones who encourage you, who pray for you, and who uplift you. These are the people who appreciate your kindness, and with them kindness flows naturally. But then there are those who only seek you out when they need something. They do not truly care about you. They only care about what you can do for them. They expect you to be there for them, but they are never there for you. And the moment you set boundaries, the moment you stop catering to their every need, they turn against you. These are the people who do not deserve your kindness. Jesus warned his disciples about this kind of person. He said in Matthew 7:15, "Beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravenous wolves." While he was speaking specifically about spiritual deception, the principle applies to all areas of life. There are people who appear kind and good on the surface, but deep down they are selfish and manipulative. They take advantage of those with kind hearts because they know they can. And if you are not careful, you will find yourself constantly giving to people who have no intention of giving back, constantly sacrificing for people who do not appreciate your sacrifices. Even within his inner circle, Jesus showed discernment. He had many followers, but he chose 12 to be his disciples. And even among the 12, he had an even closer circle: Peter, James, and John. These three were with him in moments of deep revelation, such as the Transfiguration. Why? Because Jesus understood that not everyone could handle every part of him. He knew that some people were only meant to walk with him for a season, while others were meant to go deeper. This teaches us that it is okay to have different levels of relationships. It is okay to love everyone, but not give everyone the same access to your time, your heart, and your kindness. Some people will make you feel guilty for setting boundaries. They will say you have changed, that you are not as kind as you used to be, that you have become selfish. But the truth is, real love and kindness require wisdom. If you continue to pour into people who do not appreciate you, you will have nothing left to give to the ones who truly do. If you spend all your time and energy on those who take you for granted, you will neglect the ones who genuinely love you. This is why discernment is so important. The enemy wants to drain you. He wants to keep you so busy, so exhausted, and so caught up in the needs of others that you have no energy left for your purpose. And one of his greatest tactics is to make you believe that saying no is unkind. But Jesus said no. He walked away from crowds. He withdrew to be alone. He did not feel obligated to meet every demand because he knew his mission. If you do not learn to say no, you will find yourself constantly pouring into the wrong people, and you will miss the ones God actually placed in your life to walk with you. God wants you to love others, but he also wants you to be wise. He wants you to be kind, but he does not want you to be used. He wants you to serve, but he does not want you to be drained. That is why you must learn to discern who truly values you and who is simply taking advantage of your kindness. Being wise as serpents and innocent as doves is a principle that Jesus himself taught in Matthew 10:16. He told his disciples, "Behold, I send you forth as sheep in the midst of wolves. Be ye therefore wise as serpents and harmless as doves." This means that as followers of Christ, we are called to walk in both wisdom and purity. The two must go together. Wisdom without innocence can lead to manipulation and deceit, while innocence without wisdom can lead to gullibility and harm. God does not want his people to be taken advantage of, nor does he want them to be naive about the ways of the world. Instead, he calls us to live in such a way that we are discerning, cautious, and yet filled with the love and purity of Christ. Many people misunderstand kindness and think that being kind means always saying yes, always giving, and always trusting. But Jesus never told us to trust blindly. In fact, he warned us about the dangers of those who seek to deceive and destroy. He said that we are like sheep among wolves, meaning that in this world there will be people who have bad intentions, who seek to harm, take advantage, and manipulate. If we are not wise, we will fall into their traps. If we do not learn to discern, we will give our kindness to those who only wish to misuse it. A serpent is cautious. It does not move without awareness. It studies its surroundings. It discerns danger, and it does not expose itself unnecessarily. This is the kind of wisdom that Jesus calls us to have. We must be careful about who we allow into our lives, who we share our struggles with, and who we extend our kindness to. Not everyone who appears friendly is truly a friend. Some people come into our lives pretending to be allies, but they are only there to take what they can and leave when it is convenient for them. Without wisdom, we will keep opening our hearts to the wrong people, keep trusting those who do not deserve it, and keep allowing ourselves to be drained by relationships that were never meant to be. At the same time, Jesus calls us to be innocent as doves. A dove represents purity, peace, and sincerity. This means that while we are cautious and wise, we are not to become bitter, vengeful, or deceitful ourselves. We are not called to respond to manipulation with manipulation, or to treat others with the same coldness they show us. Instead, we are to remain kind, remain pure in our intentions, and continue walking in love, but with wisdom. There is a balance that must be maintained. Some people become so hardened by betrayal and mistreatment that they close their hearts off completely, refusing to show kindness to anyone. But that is not what Jesus wants. He wants us to continue loving, but to love with discernment. Wisdom means learning to recognize the patterns of people. Some people show you through their actions that they do not respect you, yet you keep giving them another chance. Some people constantly take from you but never give in return, yet you continue to pour into them. Some people speak kindly to your face but gossip about you behind your back, yet you continue to trust them with your heart. At some point, wisdom must take over. You must learn to see people for who they really are and adjust your kindness accordingly. This is not about judging others harshly. It is about protecting the kindness God has given you. Jesus himself did not entrust himself to everyone. He spoke to the crowds, he healed the sick, he ministered to the broken, but he did not give his heart to just anyone. He knew the hearts of men, and he knew who was truly with him and who was not. Even among his 12 disciples, he knew that Judas would betray him. He did not try to change Judas. He did not plead with Judas to stay loyal. He simply let him go. That is wisdom. Some people in your life have already shown you that they are not trustworthy, yet you keep making excuses for them. You keep hoping they will change. But wisdom means accepting the truth about people and adjusting your actions accordingly. Being wise as serpents also means knowing when to walk away. There are situations where continuing to be kind only enables someone's bad behavior. If someone constantly mistreats you and yet you continue to show them the same level of kindness, they will never learn to change. If someone keeps taking advantage of your generosity and you never set boundaries, they will continue to use you. Some people only change when they lose access to the kindness they once took for granted. It is not unkind to walk away from toxic people. It is not unloving to say no to those who misuse your love. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is to remove yourself from a situation where you are being used and allow that person to face the consequences of their own actions. There are also times when wisdom means keeping silent. You do not have to respond to every accusation, defend yourself against every false claim, or explain yourself to those who have already made up their minds about you. Jesus himself remained silent before his accusers. He did not waste his energy trying to prove himself to those who were determined to misunderstand him. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is to let your actions speak for themselves and let God be your defender. Many people struggle because they feel guilty when they set boundaries. They have been taught that being a good Christian means always being available, always giving, and never saying no. But Jesus never taught this. He taught balance. He taught wisdom. He taught that we are to be kind but not foolish, loving but not naive, generous but not reckless. God wants you to have a heart that is pure, but he also wants you to have a mind that is sharp. He wants you to walk in love, but he also wants you to walk in wisdom. If you do not learn to balance the two, you will find yourself drained, frustrated, and far from the purpose he has for you. People-pleasing is one of the most dangerous traps a person can fall into. It disguises itself as kindness, as love, as being a good person, but in reality it is a heavy chain that will pull you away from the will of God. Too many people live their lives afraid to disappoint others, constantly saying yes when they should say no, constantly bending over backward to make everyone happy. But the truth is, no matter how much you do for people, it will never be enough. There will always be someone who is not satisfied, someone who wants more, someone who will turn against you the moment you stop giving them what they want. Living to please people is exhausting, and worse, it can pull you out of alignment with what God has called you to do. Jesus never lived to please people. He lived to please the Father. He healed the sick, raised the dead, preached to the lost, and performed miracles. But he was not controlled by the expectations of others. There were times when people wanted him to stay, but he moved on. There were times when the crowd wanted him to be their earthly king, but he refused. There were times when even his own disciples did not understand his decisions, yet he did not change course to make them happy. He knew that if he lived for the approval of people, he would not fulfill the purpose for which he was sent. That is a lesson every believer must learn. If you live for people's applause, you will die by their rejection. If you make decisions based on what makes others comfortable, you will find yourself walking in disobedience to God. One of the greatest dangers of people-pleasing is that it leads to compromise. You start off with good intentions, wanting to help, wanting to be there for others, but little by little, you begin to sacrifice the convictions God has placed in your heart. You start saying yes to things you should say no to. You start tolerating things you once stood against. You start neglecting the time you should be spending with God because you are too busy trying to keep everyone happy. Before you know it, you have drifted so far from where God wants you to be that you hardly recognize yourself. The enemy knows that if he can't get you to sin outright, he can simply keep you distracted, exhausted, and overcommitted to things that do not align with God's will for your life. The Bible makes it clear that you cannot serve two masters. You cannot live to please God and live to please people at the same time. Galatians 1:10 says, "For do I now persuade men or God? Or do I seek to please men? For if I yet pleased men, I should not be the servant of Christ." That is a strong statement. If your life is centered around making people happy, you are not fully serving Christ. There will be times when doing what God has called you to do will disappoint others. There will be times when you have to say no, when you have to walk away, when you have to let people be upset with you because you refuse to compromise your faith. That is the cost of obedience. People pleasers struggle with guilt. They feel responsible for everyone's happiness. They believe that if someone is upset, it must be their fault. But that is a burden you were never meant to carry. You are not responsible for making sure everyone around you is happy. You are not called to be everything to everyone. Jesus himself did not heal every sick person in Israel. He did not meet every single need. He did what the Father told him to do, and he did not feel guilty about the rest. That is the example you must follow. There are some people in your life who have learned to manipulate your kindness. They know that if they guilt trip you enough, you will give in. They know that if they act upset, you will go out of your way to make it right, even when you did nothing wrong. They have learned that your heart is soft, and they use that against you. But you must recognize when someone is taking advantage of your kindness. Being a Christian does not mean being controlled by other people's emotions. It does not mean allowing yourself to be manipulated into doing things that drain you, distract you, or pull you away from your purpose. Jesus offended people. The religious leaders were furious with him because he did not follow their traditions. Some of his own followers left him because his teachings were too hard for them. Even his own family thought he was out of his mind at one point. If Jesus, the perfect Son of God, could not please everyone, what makes you think you can? You have to make peace with the fact that some people will be disappointed with you. Some will misunderstand you. Some will talk about you, judge you, and criticize you. But at the end of the day, the only approval that truly matters is God's. When you stop being a people pleaser, some people will not like it. They will accuse you of being selfish. They will say you have changed. But the truth is, you are not being selfish. You are being obedient. You are refusing to let people dictate your life. You are choosing to walk in wisdom instead of guilt. You are learning that true love does not mean always saying yes. Sometimes love means setting boundaries. Sometimes love means saying no. Sometimes love means letting people deal with the consequences of their own actions instead of rescuing them every time they call. People-pleasing is a silent destroyer. It will steal your time, drain your energy, and pull you away from the path God has for you. It may feel like kindness, but it is really bondage. True kindness is rooted in wisdom. True kindness knows when to help and when to step back. True kindness serves God first, not the ever-changing demands of people. The sooner you break free from the need to make everyone happy, the sooner you will step into the peace, joy, and purpose God has for your life. Not everyone is meant to stay in your life, and not every relationship is a blessing. Some people come as lessons, some as tests, and others as distractions. One of the biggest mistakes people make is holding on to relationships that God is trying to remove. They cling to people out of fear, guilt, or sentimentality, even when it is clear that those relationships are unhealthy. But when God shows you who someone really is, believe him. When he removes someone from your life, let them go. There is a reason he allowed the separation. There is a reason he exposed their true character. Ignoring those warnings will only lead to pain, disappointment, and wasted time. Jesus never begged anyone to stay. He never chased after those who walked away. When the rich young ruler refused to give up his possessions and follow him, Jesus let him go. When the crowds who once followed him turned away because his teachings were too difficult, he did not try to persuade them to come back. Even when Judas was about to betray him, Jesus did not plead with him to reconsider. He simply said, "What you are about to do, do quickly." That is wisdom. Jesus understood that not everyone who starts with you will finish with you. Some people are only meant to be in your life for a season. Some were never truly with you in the first place. And some must leave in order for God's greater plan to unfold. One of the hardest things to accept is that some of the people you love the most will hurt you the deepest. Betrayal does not come from strangers. It comes from those you trusted. It comes from those you poured your time, energy, and kindness into. But the pain of betrayal is often a blessing in disguise. It exposes the truth. It removes the mask. It frees you from relationships that were never truly for you. If someone can walk away from you, let them walk. If someone can betray you, let them go. Holding on to people who do not truly value you will only hinder what God wants to do in your life. Many people struggle with letting go because they feel they have invested too much into a relationship. They believe that if they just try harder, if they give more, if they continue to be kind, things will change. But there is a difference between fighting for a relationship that is meant to last and trying to revive something that God has already declared dead. Some relationships cannot be repaired because they were never built on a solid foundation to begin with. If you have to constantly beg someone to treat you right, to respect you, to value you, then that relationship is not from God. Love should not have to be forced. Loyalty should not have to be begged for. Letting go does not mean you are bitter. It does not mean you hate the person. It simply means you are wise enough to recognize when something is no longer serving its purpose. There are times when God will separate you from certain people, not because they are bad, but because they are not right for where He is taking you. Some people are only meant to be part of your past, not your future. Some friendships were good for one season, but they will only hold you back in the next. Some relationships were never from God in the first place, but were the result of your own choices, and now He is calling you to release them. One of the biggest signs that God is telling you to let someone go is a lack of peace. When a relationship is right, there is peace. Even in difficult moments, there is a deep sense of security. But when something is not from God, there will always be uneasiness, confusion, and inner turmoil. You will find yourself constantly questioning where you stand, constantly wondering if the other person truly cares. That is not love, that is instability. God is not the author of confusion. If a relationship is causing more pain than joy, more stress than peace, it may be time to step away. Some people will try to make you feel guilty for walking away. They will say you are being too harsh, too unforgiving, too unkind. But setting boundaries is not unkind. It is necessary. Jesus Himself set boundaries. He did not give everyone the same level of access to His life. He ministered to the crowds, but He only allowed 12 to walk closely with Him, and even among the 12, He had an inner circle, Peter, James, and John. He understood that not everyone could handle the same level of intimacy. You must learn to do the same. You can love people from a distance. You can pray for them without keeping them in your life. The truth is, when God removes someone, He is making room for something better. So, the truth is, when God removes someone, He is making room for something better. Sometimes we hold on so tightly to what is familiar that we miss what God is trying to do. We stay in toxic relationships because we fear being alone. We hold on to friendships that drain us because we do not want to start over. But every time we refuse to let go of what God is removing, we delay our own growth. What if the relationship you are holding on to is the very thing keeping you from your next level? What if the person you keep chasing is standing in the way of the one God has prepared for you? Trust God enough to let go. Trust that He knows what is best for you. Trust that He sees what you cannot see. Sometimes rejection is protection. Sometimes a door closing is actually a blessing. If God is calling you to release someone, obey Him. You may not understand it now, but one day you will look back and realize that letting go was the best thing you could have done.